Power isn't given. It's taken. A world ruled by fear. Only the strongest survive. The Boss Chronicle.
The cameras were everywhere, phones lifted high, hundreds of eyes watching as it happened. The Mafia boss's daughter, Lucia, stood frozen. Her face went white as the rich boy, Vincent, stepped toward her with that arrogant smile. He was handsome in a cruel way, the kind of handsome that made people forget how dangerous cruelty could be. "Look at you," Vincent laughed, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "The precious daughter of the great Mafia boss. You know what's funny? You're nothing without him." Lucia tried to leave, but Vincent grabbed her wrist. People watched. Nobody stopped him. "Your father's gone soft," Vincent continued, his words dripping with poison. "Everyone knows it. He used to be powerful. Now, he's just a ghost playing pretend. And you're proof that he doesn't matter anymore." He released her wrist with a shove. Lucia stumbled backward, tears burning her eyes but refusing to fall. The video uploaded within seconds. By morning, it had 3 million views. That same evening, in his private office, the Mafia boss watched the video once. His face remained completely calm. While the world laughed at him online, while people commented about how he'd lost his touch, he did something unexpected. He saved the video. Not deleted it. Not forgotten it. Saved it. Then he whispered something to himself. Let the boy think he won. The news cycle turned the humiliation into a story about power. Lucia was painted as arrogant and spoiled. Headlines called her the Mafia princess who got what she deserved. Vincent became the unlikely hero, the young man brave enough to speak truth to power. Magazines called him fearless. Social media made him a symbol. The Mafia boss said nothing. He didn't offend his daughter publicly. He didn't threaten Vincent. He didn't even appear angry. To the world, his silence looked like weakness. To his enemies, it looked like confirmation. The old boss really was finished. But inside his headquarters, behind closed doors, the Mafia boss called an emergency meeting. His most trusted advisors sat around the dark table, waiting. These were men who'd worked for him for decades. Men who knew what his silences meant. Who allowed this? The Mafia boss asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a blade. Nobody answered immediately because everyone understood what that question really meant. It wasn't about Vincent. It wasn't even about Lucia. It was about security. It was about someone inside his circle making a mistake. Someone told Vincent about our plans. The Mafia boss continued. Someone told him where Lucia would be. Someone wanted this to happen. He stood up slowly, walking past each man. Find them, he said, but don't punish them. Not yet. His advisor, Antonio, frowned. Sir, shouldn't we? I said not yet. The Mafia boss interrupted, his voice soft but absolute. Whoever betrayed us will be more valuable to us alive and thinking they're still hidden. Let them feel safe. Let them keep talking. That night, the Mafia boss sat with Lucia in her room. She was still crying, though she tried to hide it. They're saying horrible things, she whispered. Everyone believes them. They think I'm weak. The Mafia boss didn't comfort her with lies. Instead, he said something that confused her completely. Let them. Within 3 days, private information about Lucia started leaking. Her daily routine, the time she left her apartment, the places she went. Details that should have been impossible to know, except someone inside the Mafia boss's organization was sharing them. The leaks made it online. Vincent's followers tracked her movements. They showed up where she went, taking pictures, filming videos. The harassment intensified daily. Lucia felt hunted. When she told her father, she expected rage. She expected him to activate his network and destroy whoever was responsible. But he simply nodded and said, I know. You know? Lucia couldn't believe it. Then why hasn't he been dealt with? Because, the Mafia boss said carefully, sometimes you need to know exactly how deep the poison goes before you can cure it. He spent the next week identifying the leak. It was Marco, a lieutenant who'd worked for him for 15 years. Marco's gambling debts had become too big. Vincent's people had paid them off. In exchange, Marco provided information. The Mafia boss had his men follow Marco, without Marco knowing. They documented every meeting, every payment, every secret Marco shared. But the Mafia boss didn't move against him. Instead, he waited because he was already seeing something that Vincent couldn't. The younger man thought he was playing chess, but he was walking into a trap that had been set before he even moved his first piece. Vincent decided his first victory wasn't enough. He wanted more. He wanted complete humiliation. 2 weeks after the first incident, he arranged another public confrontation. This time, he brought cameras from his own social media crew. He paid influencers to film it. He made sure that every moment would be documented. Lucia was leaving a restaurant when he appeared with his crew. "Hey, Lucia," Vincent called out, his voice dripping with fake friendliness. "I wanted to ask you something. Since your father has gone so quiet, does that mean he's finally accepting the truth? That he's afraid?" The cameras rolled. The influencers smiled. Lucia stood frozen. "Your father used to scare people," Vincent continued, pacing in front of her like a hunter circling prey. "Now he just hides. He lets his daughter get embarrassed. What happened to him? Did he finally realize he was never actually powerful?" Lucia wanted to respond. She wanted to fight back. But she said nothing, and Vincent took her silence as confirmation. "That's what I thought," he laughed. "The great Mafia boss has turned into a coward." The video spread even faster than the first one. The narrative was complete now. The Mafia boss was finished. Everyone agreed. News outlets that once spoke about him with fear now called him irrelevant. But that night, sitting alone in his office, the Mafia boss smiled. It was the kind of smile that made experienced men nervous. It was a smile of someone who just watched his opponent walk exactly where he wanted him to walk. He picked up his phone and made a single call. "Begin phase 2, he said quietly. Then he hung up. Lucia couldn't handle it anymore. One night, she went to her father's office. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were red from crying. "I don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't understand why you're letting him do this. Why won't you protect me?" The Mafia boss looked up from his desk. He studied his daughter for a long moment. "Come here," he said. Lucia sat down across from him. She expected anger or tough love or strategies about revenge. She didn't expect what came next. "Do you know what protection really is?" he asked gently. "Most people think it's violence. They think power is about how hard you can hit. But that's not what protection is." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "Real protection," he continued, "is making sure your enemy destroys himself. It's being patient enough to let him walk into the trap. He doesn't even know he's digging. It's letting him feel victorious for just long enough that he becomes careless." He turned back to face her. "Vincent thinks he's winning," the Mafia boss said. "He thinks he's humiliated me. That's exactly what I want him to think. Because right now he's making mistakes. He's becoming reckless. Every move he makes is a thread in the rope that will eventually hang him." Lucia still didn't understand. "You asked if I'll protect you," the Mafia boss said, walking back to her. "I'm already protecting you. Right now, at this very moment. You just can't see it yet." He placed his hand on her shoulder. "Trust me," he whispered. "This ends the way I plan it to end. And when it does, everyone will know exactly what Vincent really is." People began investigating Vincent. It started with curiosity. Journalists wondered where this fearless young man came from. What was his background? How did a nobody become so confident so quickly? The answers they found were dark. Vincent's wealth came from his father's business, but his father's business was built on fraud. Worse, Vincent himself had a history of bullying. There were photos of him humiliating servants. There were recordings of him talking about people like they were nothing. Most damaging were the stories from girls. Multiple women came forward about how Vincent had treated them. As toys, as conquest, as things to be discarded after he grew bored. But Vincent didn't care about what people found. He was addicted to dominance. He enjoyed making people suffer, especially people who couldn't fight back. And he convinced himself that his wealth protected him from consequences. He decided to make his next move permanent. He gathered photos and personal information about Lucia. He planned to release them online along with false stories designed to destroy her reputation completely. He would make people believe she was unstable, dangerous, unhinged. It would ruin her life. He smiled as he made these plans. He had no idea that the Mafia boss's people had been documenting every conversation, recording every meeting, watching every step. The trap was almost complete. Vincent made his move on a Tuesday morning. He prepared the fake documents. He manipulated the photos. He wrote the post that would destroy Lucia forever. He uploaded the first one at 9:47 a.m. For exactly 8 minutes, the post existed on the internet. And in those 8 minutes, 40,000 people saw it. They began sharing. They began commenting. The momentum was building. At 9:55 a.m., the post disappeared. Vincent tried to upload it again. Nothing happened. His account had been locked from the inside. Not by the platform, by someone who had access to his accounts that he didn't even know about. He tried his backup accounts. Same thing. Frantic. He called his associates. But something had happened to all of them too. All of their accounts had been compromised simultaneously. The Mafia boss had orchestrated it perfectly. And in his office, after doing this, the Mafia boss simply shut down all communications. All his phones went silent. His office became a black box. Nobody could reach him. Not his allies. Not his people. Not his lawyer. The silence was complete. And it was absolutely terrifying. That 1 hour of silence changed everything. While the Mafia boss was unreachable, chaos erupted around Vincent. Banks that had loaned him money suddenly called in his debts. Every single loan was due immediately. Meetings that had been scheduled were canceled without explanation. Access to his family's business accounts was revoked. People who'd been his friends became strangers. His own employees wouldn't answer his calls. Vincent didn't understand what was happening. He tried to laugh it off. "It's all temporary," he told his remaining friends. "My father will fix this. It's probably just some computer glitch." But his hands were shaking. By the end of that hour, the Mafia boss came back online. He never explained what he'd done. He simply returned to his normal routine as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Vincent fought back the only way he knew how, with money and influence. Using his remaining resources, he struck hard at one of the Mafia boss's public businesses. Through complex financial maneuvers, he managed to get it shut down. The business collapsed overnight. Hundreds of people lost their jobs. The news made headlines. Mafia boss loses major business in young rival's power play. The world declared the Mafia boss finished. News outlets that had forgotten about him suddenly remembered. They ran stories about how he was finally being challenged by someone younger, someone more modern, someone more ruthless. Vincent's confidence returned. He'd landed a real blow. That was when he received a message from the Mafia boss. Not a threat, not a warning. Just 3 simple words passed through a third party. "Well done." Vincent didn't know what to do with that response. It wasn't what he expected. It wasn't the response of a defeated man. But the Mafia boss knew something Vincent didn't. The business he'd let collapse was already dying. The Mafia boss had planned for it to fall for months. It was a sacrifice piece, something he was willing to lose because losing it fit perfectly into his larger plan. While Vincent celebrated his victory, the Mafia boss was already moving his pieces forward. That's when Vincent began to realize something was profoundly wrong. There were no threats from the Mafia boss. No violence, no retaliation in the traditional sense, just consequences that Vincent couldn't trace back to their source. He would wake up to discover that competitors had gone bankrupt. Allies would suddenly refuse to work with him. Money he thought was secure would disappear from accounts. But there was never any direct attack. The fear was worse than any physical threat could have been. Vincent started sleeping poorly. He stopped eating. His friends noticed his paranoia growing. He suspected everyone. He trusted no one. The psychological pressure was immense. Then he received documentation that his largest debts had been secretly acquired by a single buyer. Every loan he owed, every financial obligation he had, they were all now held by the same person, someone whose name he didn't recognize. Vincent hired investigators to find out who owned these debts. But every trail led to dead ends and shell companies. He didn't know that the Mafia boss had orchestrated this entire thing. And he didn't know that the person behind the shell companies was standing right next to him most days. The trap was tightening. The Mafia boss sent a message. It was delivered personally, by hand, directly to Vincent. "Come talk," the message read. "You deserve to understand what you've done. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. I want you to know exactly why this happened." Vincent stared at the message for a long time. Part of him wanted to refuse. Part of him knew this was dangerous. But pride won out. He wanted to understand what the Mafia boss was doing. He wanted to face him directly. He wanted to prove that he wasn't afraid. So when the invitation came formally 3 days later, Vincent accepted immediately. He didn't know the meeting had already been planned down to the smallest detail. He didn't know that every conversation he would have, every word he would say, had been anticipated. He walked toward the meeting thinking he was about to finally confront his rival. In reality, he was walking toward his ending. They met in a private restaurant after hours. Just Vincent, the Mafia boss, and emptiness. The Mafia boss sat across from Vincent at a simple table. No guards visible. No threats. Just two men in an empty room. "You challenged the wrong thing," the Mafia boss said quietly. Vincent laughed. "I challenge you, and I'm winning." "No," the Mafia boss replied, his voice calm and certain. "You challenged the people I love, and you did it publicly. That was your mistake." Vincent's phone suddenly lit up. Then it lit up again. And again, notifications flooded in. Vincent opened his messages and his face went pale. His father had been arrested for fraud. His mother's accounts had been frozen. Every business partner he had was abandoning him. News outlets were releasing stories about his history of abuse. Girls he'd mistreated were being interviewed on national television. It was happening all at once. Total collapse. "How?" Vincent whispered. "Patience," the Mafia boss answered. "I've been collecting evidence for weeks. I've been building this moment since the day you humiliated my daughter." Vincent looked up, and for the first time, he saw what true power actually looked like. "You're not finished," the Mafia boss continued. "I wanted you alive for this. I wanted you conscious and aware as you lost everything." The next morning, Lucia made a statement. She prepared it carefully. She stood in front of cameras, composed, strong, unbroken. She told her story, not as a victim, but as a witness. She described Vincent's behavior in detail. She talked about the harassment. She spoke about his cruelty. And most importantly, she revealed something nobody expected. She'd been working with authorities the entire time. She'd been collecting evidence. She'd been documenting everything. She wasn't the weak one. She was a shield protecting her father's larger plan. The narrative flipped completely. People who'd mocked the Mafia boss suddenly felt foolish. They'd been watching a man protect his daughter, and they'd interpreted it as weakness. Now they understood. The Mafia boss had never been weak. He'd simply been patient. Lucia's testimony was what cinched everything. With her evidence combined with the Mafia boss's resources, prosecutors had an airtight case. The world was forced to look at Vincent not as a fearless hero, but as what he actually was, a privileged bully who'd gone too far. Vincent begged. He offered money. He offered silence. He offered anything and everything he could think of. "Please," he said to the Mafia boss during a final meeting, "I'll disappear. I'll leave the country. You'll never hear from me again." The Mafia boss listened to every plea. Then he responded with a single sentence. "You already chose." Vincent didn't understand. "I gave you a choice," the Mafia boss explained. "The moment you humiliated my daughter publicly, you had a choice. You could have walked away. You could have apologized. You could have been better." Vincent tried to speak, but the Mafia boss continued. "Instead, you chose to keep going. You chose to be cruel. You chose to hunt her. You made your choice." The Mafia boss stood up. "And now you'll live with the consequences." He offered Vincent one final option. "You can disappear quietly, and the evidence against you stops here. Your father might survive this. Your mother might keep something. You'll be known as a fool who challenged the wrong man, and that will haunt you forever. Or you can fight and everyone goes down. Vincent understood what he was being offered. It wasn't mercy. It was the only thing left that could save anyone in his family. He chose to disappear. No one was arrested. There was no violence. There was no dramatic court case or public trial. Vincent simply vanished. He left the country with minimal resources and a new identity. His family's reputation was destroyed, but they survived. That was the mafia boss's mercy. He could have destroyed them completely. He could have ensured they spent decades in prison. He could have taken everything. Instead, he gave them a chance to disappear. As for Vincent, he spent the rest of his life knowing the truth, that he'd challenge a man who was infinitely more intelligent and patient, that his wealth meant nothing against true power, that the girl he'd humiliated was stronger than he could ever be. The mafia boss walked away with his daughter, completely untouched. No charges against him. No evidence that could be used against him. The entire operation had been run so perfectly that from the outside, it looked like Vincent had simply destroyed himself. Lucia recovered. She went back to her normal life. But she was different now. She understood that her father's silence had never been weakness. It had been the most dangerous thing he could do. The world had expected rage. It had expected violence. It had expected a mafia boss to respond like a mafia boss. Instead, it had watched him respond like a strategist, like a father, like a man so powerful. He didn't need to prove it. The story spread. People whispered about what had really happened. They understood that they'd witnessed something rare. A man who destroyed his enemy without ever raising his hand. The mafia boss became more feared than he'd ever been before. Not because of what he did, but because of his patience. And because everyone finally understood that sometimes the most dangerous power is the power to wait.